Just over a decade ago, BBC Top Gear went to China. It filmed a 2-episode special focusing on China's rapidly growing automotive industry. It discussed how China's voracious demand for cars was driving an equally voracious demand for fossil fuels. It detailed the astonishing statistics relating to the frequency with which a new car was made and sold in the People's Republic of China. And it discussed some of China's lackadaisical attitudes towards safety and copyright at the time. These 2 episodes, pretty well known by petrolheads around the world, still, to this day, form the basis of many people's opinions about Chinese-made vehicles. Vehicles that are poorly made, lack appropriate safety features, and just copy everyone else's ideas. But in the last decade, a lot has changed in the automotive industry in China. Not only have many Chinese brands begun to build their own vehicles and develop their own technologies, but they're starting to grab market share and attention elsewhere in the world. And thanks to a massive transition in China that has seen new energy vehicles, that's battery electric and plug-in hybrid, gain a market share that could see them pass internal combustion engine vehicles as the dominant fuel type in the Chinese market this year, China is basically becoming a leading force in the EV world. So why then are European and North American automakers pushing their respective governments to crack down on imports of Chinese-made EVs? And why did the US White House just announce a quadrupling of import tariffs on Chinese-made EVs? You are going to hear a lot of different takes on this in the next few weeks and likely throughout election seasons in many countries around the world. But today I'm going to try and dig down to figure out what's going on, tackle some of the concerns people have, and ask if there is a path through this that can benefit everyone. In making this video, there are a bunch of things we need to discuss that are not directly attached to EV production. China, or the People's Republic of China, is a country known for not treating its citizens very well. And while I am sure there are many who will attempt to debate this in the comments, I'm going to deal with well-documented, internationally recognised facts here as per Amnesty International. The Chinese government is known for curtailing the rights of its citizens in a myriad of ways, often under the pretext of preserving national security. It commonly harasses and arrests protesters and journalists who speak out against the government, and its treatment of ethnic groups within China, including Uyghurs and Tibetans, is abhorrent. It has a very poor record on LGBTQIA+ rights and freedom of the press, and it continues to threaten invasion of Taiwan, not to mention curtailing of rights of the people of Hong Kong, which, while technically still a special administrative region of China, is slowly being consumed back into China as Beijing makes its presence felt. And that's before you consider the various alleged cyber attacks China is accused of carrying out against a whole slew of nations around the world, including the US and many European countries. And in discussing Chinese-made and Chinese-market EVs, I want to make it really clear that we here at the channel do not condone the PRC's actions against democracy, basic human rights, freedom of expression, or a free and open market. But I also want to acknowledge that when it comes to how much we rely on Chinese-made goods for our modern lives, it is important to note that an overwhelming majority of computer parts, circuit boards, and those super cheap doohickeys you buy on Amazon for $10 all come from China. I want to be absolutely clear. We should do everything we can to put pressure on China to stop the abhorrent things going on there, and campaigning to lawmakers to ensure that pressure is applied. In fact, we should, at an international level, be putting pressure on any nation that treats its citizens badly, including probably some of the countries that all of us live in. But not engaging with Chinese-made products out of protest for those particular issues, while noble, that ship sadly sailed a very long time ago. If you have purchased a mobile phone, a laptop computer, or a fancy gadget recently, the likelihood is that it came from a Chinese factory, or at least something inside it did. When it comes to EVs, it's worth noting that there are two very different types of vehicles rolling off production lines in China. While that BBC Top Gear programme of more than a decade ago portrayed the Chinese auto industry as being full of poorly made knockoff clones of vehicles from European and American brands that would fall apart in short order, there are now brands in China making EVs to the same or better standards than you'd find from a European, Japanese, American or Korean manufacturer. Basically, Chinese automakers have done exactly what Japanese automakers did between the 1970s and 80s, and what Korean automakers did between the 1990s and the turn of the century. They've changed their reputation from being a joke to being a serious force in the automotive industry. And yes, there are still plenty of cheaply made, shoddily built vehicles, both ICE and EV, being made in China. And I'm sure some of you will know of vehicles like the now infamous Shangli brand of low-speed EVs, and that is before we even discuss the impossibly large slew of terribly made, low-cost Chinese-made e-bikes flooding the market around the world. But we're also starting to see a change in the marketplace, with more and more competent Chinese EVs going on sale outside of China. Of course, it is not just vehicles. Earlier this year, I purchased a Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon, a 3D printer that's made by a Chinese company. Its founder studied and worked in Europe for a number of years, and that informed how Bamboo Labs worked on and designed its 3D printers. Frankly, it is as good, if not better, than many other brands, and for most 3D printing enthusiasts, the X1C and similar printers have eclipsed many non-Chinese brand 3D printers like those from Prusa. In the marketplace, this is what's happening with cars as well. In the automotive industry, Chinese-made EVs being imported to other markets is a politically charged topic, and with good reason. And while you might assume safety concerns play a part, they really don't. I'm not going to delve deeply into crash tests and automotive homologation practices, but the too long didn't read is that in order for any vehicle to go on sale in any country, it needs to satisfy the crash test safety requirements and emissions requirements and homologation requirements for that country. If it doesn't meet those safety requirements, it cannot be put on sale. So decrying a Chinese-made vehicle as being unsafe is frankly a bit of a red herring. If it's on sale in Europe, for example, it's on sale because it met the European safety requirements laid out in EU law for automobiles. And if it's being sold as a quadricycle, it means it meets the quadricycle safety standards which I'll concede are much less strict than car safety standards. And that also includes safety standards for things like battery packs. E-bikes, well, they are different because they don't have the same kind of safety standard requirements in markets as cars and motorcycles. So it is much more likely you're going to see poorly made, shoddily designed vehicles get imported. Changing import laws and requiring testing would go a long way to solve e-bike issues, but that is for another video. Anyway, back to the problems regarding imports into many markets outside of China of Chinese-made EVs. It's not about quality anymore, but two particular concerns: unfair pricing and cybersecurity. There are also valid concerns about worker rights and pay, and we shouldn't dismiss those concerns as inconsequential. But again, see my earlier comment for workers' rights and fair pay and the fact that we are all, intentionally or not, playing a small part in perpetuating terrible practices by making consumer choices whose implications we really do not fully understand. This is, unfortunately, another chance for me to reference The Good Place, which kind of fully lays out the problem in a way that I can't beat. So if you haven't watched that series, go watch it now. These two twin concerns, pricing and cybersecurity, are at the heart of tariffs in both Europe and the US, and it's why President Joe Biden just took the 25% tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump and quadrupled them for EVs this year. With limited worker protections, Chinese-made EVs can be produced for a far lower cost than they can in many other nations around the world. Basically, if you're willing to pay your workers less, or you're having to spend less money on things like healthcare and retirement plans, you're going to have larger margins than someone who produces the same thing but spends more money on keeping workers healthy, happy, and safe. But it's worse than that. The EU has long been investigating and recently found China guilty of unfairly subsidizing Chinese automakers in China in order to allow them to sell EVs in export markets at prices that dramatically undercut domestic makers in said markets. This is giving those EVs, who, let's remind you, have all passed required safety and homologation checks, an unfair advantage in the marketplace against domestic-made EVs who have none of those benefits. The true level of subsidies isn't 100% known, but it's worth remembering that the Chinese economy is massive, and the government, which is still the majority owner of many large businesses, including some automakers, can underwrite those costs in order to gain advantage on non-Chinese automakers in export markets. And yeah, there is a level of hypocrisy here. We are, after all, in a world where most of us happily take advantage of low-cost Chinese-made phones and gadgets, but not cars. And if I had to guess, I'm going to suspect that the Chinese government is subsidizing EV production. It did and probably does still subsidize electronics as well. Though to be clear, I don't have any proof of that, just a hunch. This heavy subsidizing means that non-Chinese automakers are at a disadvantage in the marketplace. Not only do they need to charge more for a vehicle, but they also take longer to reach profitability and recover return on investment. And that is a massive issue, hence attempts by lawmakers to make some kind of protections for their domestic markets. Will these laws prevent Chinese automakers from building EVs for non-Chinese markets? No. Absolutely not. And just as American and European automakers have factories in China where they make and sell Chinese market EVs for Chinese customers, often through partnerships with local Chinese subsidiaries, we can expect Chinese automakers to establish Chinese-owned factories outside of China. In fact, it is already happening, and it's happened in the past as well. The famous US chicken tax, the 25% import tariff slapped onto every pickup truck entering the US from overseas, was an attempt by President Johnson to protect the interests of the US auto industry and prevent European and later Japanese-made pickup trucks from flooding the US market. And it worked. Ultimately, while there are fewer pickups from European and Japanese brands than there may have been had the chicken tax not occurred, automakers who did want to build pickups for the US market ultimately ended up just building factories and making them in the US. And while I do have some views on the chicken tax that I'm not going to go into here, it is likely to be repeated with EVs, and it's already happening in multiple ways, and companies, both established and startup, are now announcing new partnerships with Chinese-made brands. Stellantis just did it for Europe. Meanwhile, companies like Polestar, for example, are demonstrating this in a really big way. Polestar, if you don't know, is part of a massive Chinese auto giant, Geely, a company that owns Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, and many other brands. Volvo and Polestar are preparing to build EVs for the US market in the US at a factory they're building in the US, and that means those companies get to benefit from US tax incentives designed to encourage automakers to bring domestic market manufacturing to the US. And in Europe, we can expect similar things, and many brands, including NIO, BYD, and others, have already announced their intent to establish their own production facilities to build EVs for the European market in Europe. Now, of course, there are some truly massive loopholes here. There is nothing, for example, to stop a Chinese-owned EV company from relying on its own Chinese domestic incentives to help fund and develop an EV, and then use that competitive advantage to set up a US or European production facility and sell them there. And I fully expect that to happen. I think it already is. And to be clear, if that results in more affordable EVs made by local workers that are well treated and have the benefits of working in a country where their rights and protections are guaranteed, you know what? Bring it. We need more affordable EVs, and that's really the best way I can see us achieving that. But there is, as you might remember, one more thing that's concerning automakers and politicians alike: the spectre of cybersecurity. Even if a Chinese-owned company makes and sells vehicles domestically in non-Chinese markets, there's a real fear that those vehicles will contain computer hardware and software that leaks information about the car's owners, their use patterns, and more to the Chinese government. And we've seen that fear spread before about electronics, and it's an ongoing issue in cybersecurity circles, of course. We could see laws written to prohibit data centres from sending data intra-country and requiring telematics for cars to be established in the country where the vehicles are located. But again, I think that there is a whole nother video for that. For what it's worth though, I think China is frankly ahead of many other countries when it comes to EVs, battery technology and more. And one way or another, they are coming for large legacy automakers whose transition to electric has been far from smooth. Those automakers have an ultimate choice: improve or get their market share decimated, because at the end of the day, we are now in a very real price war, and even if tariffs help even the playing field, tech, design and capabilities will ultimately be what customers care about. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of more than the 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just over $10 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters. Look, it's Moose, Dom, Stefan Benti, Tom G. Richardson, Benjamin Ford, Indigo, and Kem. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at, address also below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store, also linked below. This month, we are celebrating a new amazing t-shirt design by our in-house artist and animator, Erin. Get yours today by heading to our Redbubble store. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you've subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think this one is well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving.